August 15th, 2018. We have a fairly light agenda. The first item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Mark Kelleher for his proposed sugar kelp aquaculture on Nantucket Sound. Hi, Mark. Yeah, please.
Okay.
I think it's a continuance, and what we were waiting for was word from Natural Heritage on
Right.
their
And,
ruling.
That's the letter, I received it yesterday, so.
Right, we did receive that.
I received that, there's no adverse effect from the kelp farmers as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So I think we're ready to rule on this. Any further questions from the commissioners? We went through the project fairly in fair detail last time.
That was,
We haven't heard from DMF yet, so,
Okay.
we can close the hearing, but we would just have the provision that whatever conditions they set, we would include in our order.
Okay.
So the order wouldn't be issued till we hear from them.
All right.
And they're said the middle of August, so it's getting close to that. So.
Okay.
Mark, were you okay with that little adjustment on the western end that we discussed last time? Was that something that was reasonable?
Can you refresh my mind on that? I have my notes here, but just,
Yeah, the western end, I think one of the buoys came right up to that eastern slope of Kill Pond Bar.
yeah.
And that's a place where people do fish, rod and reel, mid-May into, mid-June. And
Okay.
so if your gear was sitting right on that slope, it might possibly,
So what you're saying is, and the coordinates I gave should be in the deep water, shouldn't be on the upward slope.
Yep,
But I can make sure, I mean, I have some leeway with the Army Corps.
Yep.
I'll make sure that I'm in that deep water,
yeah,
off
Right.
the upward slope to the bar.
okay. It's probably in everyone's best interest to not have interactions.
Yeah, and I may even, sometimes when you're dealing with the DMF and the Army Corps, but I may, with that input, try and move it a little bit more east.
Okay.
Just to be all the more out of the way.
All right.
and could I just ask, if I remember correctly, it wasn't going to impact like June through September, is that correct?
The intent is to have it out by May 15th.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments?
No, I don't have
Okay, well, I would like to make a motion that we approve the notice of intent for the proposal for a sugar kelp aquaculture farm or facility on Nantucket Sound.
Second.
Second that. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries.
it. Thank you
So,
very much.
so we'll keep the hearing open, waiting for the DMF letter.
Yep, and then, once we get that, we'll have the orders on and.
Okay. All right. Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Do they notify you as well as me?
Usually,
Okay, great. I'll just in case I get it, I'll make sure.
yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yep, thanks. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 8 Whippoorwill Lane, the installation of a seasonal floating pier and dock on Bucks Pond. We have a representative here. Yep.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So as I understand it, just before you start, we're waiting on Waterways Committee to hear what they have to say about this project, so we can open the hearing, but we will have to continue it until we get that feedback from the Waterways Committee.
Yes, I understand that. I was unaware of the waterways. I didn't understand their role in the process, so, because I did the NESA application at the same time as the NOI
Right.
and the NESA. There were 3 applications.
Right.
So Amy Usowski alerted me last week that I would need something from the waterways, but because there was no application, I guess I just didn't understand.
Right. It's part of our bylaws to have this commission receive input from them before we rule on a project to do with docks and piers in the waterways. So we can open and we can discuss it. You can present the project and we'll have questions and then we'll continue it until a later date.
Okay. I start?
Yes. If you want to describe the project.
All right, now, do you all already have paperwork on it?
We do, just to, be upfront, we are aware that the dock went in without authorization, and so that's an issue that we'll discuss as well. But you're before us now with a notice of intent, so we're going to discuss the notice of intent. We'll also discuss the the infraction, for putting the dock in without authorization, and so that'll be discussed. But I think to start with, why don't you present what you have for a project for us, and then we'll have some questions for you, and then we'll get into the, you know, the placement of the dock without authorization.
Well, the notice proposes installation of a 25-foot seasonal floating pier slash dock off of my private home on Bucks Pond at the end of Whippoorwill Lane. The existing conditions, you know, yes, it had been installed. I was unaware that there was any permitting or application process. I've grown up on Bucks Pond. I've been coming here since I was 7. My mom bought a house and still owns it on Lakeside Terrace, 3 houses down and 2 houses down from my neighbor here, Taylor Rose. So I grew up swimming and boating past docks and piers on both ponds, John, Joseph, and Bucks. So when we bought the house from the Cohens on Whippoorwill, I had kind of modeled what I was putting together off of other docks that I saw on the 2 ponds, and never knew that there was any permitting process needed, so I certainly apologize for the infraction. I was unaware. Shame on me. I should have done more research. So the setup of the dock it is environmentally friendly. That's why I researched the other ones that have been purchased. It's from a company called Connect the Dock. There's a YMCA camp in Sandwich that has a very large structure of the same exact material. The other piece of it was the broker that sold it to me, dock broker. I sort of feel like maybe he should have already made it. There might be something involved, but he didn't. But I guess that would potentially block his sale. At any rate, once Amy made me aware in June, immediately started working on the NOI and trying to gather all the information. In fact, I cut this file down in half about an hour ago before coming here, so it's a lot of information. So in part of that process, I found out that it was in what's called priority habitat 374. So we did the MESA application, and they were very prompt at getting back to me. I don't know, I forwarded the letter to Amy. I don't know if she shared it with you, Nikki, or...
Yeah, I have a copy, and I believe she emailed everybody saying none of it's no adverse impact.
Right, so that was a pleasant surprise, because they kind of warned me that it would be 60 to 90 days, so we got back to me in a week. So the plan would be to have it up from mid-May through mid-September, and then disassemble it and store it away from the water. So when we took it down, we just did that on August 3rd, took it down. So the work, based on the help that I got from Moran Associates, the engineer in Harwich, would be to change the location of it. It's very easy to install and disassemble. The only thing actually touching the ground is 4 2-inch poles. In fact, I've got a pretty good sized picture here that you can all see. So those pieces that are on the water float and can handle a ton of weight. They're filled with air. So the only pieces touching the ground are the 4 poles, and they're 2 inches wide. And they simply go into the sand. It's got a little auger at the end. 3 screws just to kind of, it's really just to keep them from floating side to side. So we just, when we took it down, it took us about 45 minutes to keep it down. So it's very easy to move in the water. So Moran suggests that we move it based on his studies of the town's access rights or buffer zones, is to move it about, I think it's 10 or 15 feet, actually closer to Joe's property. Initially when I put it in, I had it on that edge of my property, just to try to avoid being a frustration to Joe, but his grandchildren are using it, and they're happy to have it there, thankfully, so So we'll follow those instructions and move it per the site plan that we had sent through. And again, we would put it up mid-May and take it down mid-September. I think part of my other mea culpa is that we didn't gain access to the house till September 15th last fall. And that's when I had the dock delivered the next day. So I installed it, we used it 4 weekends in a row. My plan was to come down and take it out, but having never done it before, and then it got late and it got cold, I just figured I'd leave it in. Again, I didn't realize that it's supposed to be seasonal. So, that's, now we know it's a 4-month deal.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, any comments for us?
Well, Amy wrote up a pretty good site summary for it. She did have issue with how close it was to the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland. And her concern was that you'd be needing to prune to keep the edge of brush area off of the docks, and she didn't want any pruning really to happen in that area. You are pretty close to the property line, which isn't our concern, but the state does tend to have issues with being only 10 feet away. So you do have to, get a variance from them. But they'll let you know on that one. And then there's also just issues with the fence and some other stuff, the tie wall that have gone onto the association property. And then the wall also doesn't have any permitting. So she was concerned with those and would like them to come off of the association property and just be on yours.
So I guess I'm unclear about, we just bought the house.
Mhm.
And you're saying the fence is on.
Right, so here's the site plan. Your property line is right there, and then you have this fence that goes out into where your old dock was, and then this railroad tie wall that is. So to avoid encroachment further on the association property, it's best to try and get rid of all those.
But it's my understanding from Marianne that this is my property, but that there's a buffer zone or an easement from this property that's town property or association property.
All I can see is that this is your property line and you have stuff over there. I don't know if your easement details that you're allowed to have a fence and all that kind of stuff on it, or not. So you'd have to look into your association covenant and do some deed research to prove that you're allowed to have a fence on that property.
Okay. Fence was there when we bought it.
Right, we know that,
So-
but
You know that.
unfortunately, things like this come to light when you start doing a permitting process. And then the railroad tie wall that goes along the water there was never permitted, and it's probably not something they would have allowed at this point. So she suggested removing that as well and revegetating the area.
I could just add some historical facts. That wall was there when I bought my house in 1982. My beach, I'm on Lakeside Terrace, but my beach abuts the property there that was the Cullen's, but before that, it was, I'll think of their name in a second, but they owned it for years and years and years, and that wall was there when I bought my house in '82.
Right, but it's unpermitted, so
Okay, well,
it needs to either be permitted or removed.
What if they can document that it was pre-existing to our bylaws? Then
Yeah, if you can prove that it was,
I swim
In
laps
existence
sort of out on
before.
the lake. I remember, and Mr., I think of his name now.
Colin?
No, before Collins. They had owned it for a long, long time. He actually won some kind of a medal in the what was the ones that were in the Olympics back in Germany. Before World War
36?
II. He was
Yeah.
a doctor too, Dr. Oster. Oster was their names. And he used to swim laps and I swim laps. And even at my young age at the time, I wasn't as good a swimmer as he was at probably 80 years old or 70 or whatever he was there. But I remember the wall was always there, because I used to go over and talk to him on the beach, and I would swim with him sometimes.
Do you know if it was?
They owned it for years. They owned it before '82.
Right. Do you know if the wall was reconstructed at any point?
I don't think so, because the Cohens, he had it set up, and the Cohens never changed much of anything except they put that fence in.
Right.
They had 2 dogs, and they fenced in the entire yard. They stopped the fence short of the beach. Well, I don't see the diagram there, but I know approximately where the fence was, but it's a see-through fence. And they had their dogs running around in the yard there, usually quite early in the morning. And they like to bark. I have a dog too. But at any rate, the only thing the Cohens ever did to the house, and I can't remember what year they bought it from the estate of the Oshner people. And it was sort of empty for a while there. The daughter lived I remember she lived up in Vermont, and there was some children, and I think they were sorting out the estate, so they would come down once in a while, but for a couple of years it was pretty empty after the wife passed away. He passed away first. And then the Cohens bought it, and all they did was they put in a fence so that the dogs couldn't get out. And they didn't do anything to the beach. It remained pretty much the same. They put some chairs down below the wall where the sand was there, and that was about it.
All right. Okay, well,
historically, I know that. That's all.
well, thank you for that input. Do you want to keep that timber wall? Is it something you would like to keep, or would you envision the
I
problem?
would, because I feel that it's actually holding back erosion. I mean, if we take it down, everything there is just gonna fall right in.
It's possible you could sculpture it to have a more natural beach, but I would say what we need then, I think, for the next hearing would be for you to find some documentation that it was pre-existing, and then I think that we could probably authorize keeping it if it was pre-existing our wetlands bylaws.
And those were until 2014, were those bylaws?
No, first ones were 98, or, hold on a
I'm
second.
not sure when Harwich's were, I know
Town of
that.
Harwich adopted May '03, revised a bunch of times. And then the Wetlands Protection Bylaw revised and adopted May 2014.
That's not the original though.
Yeah.
That's just as we get revisions and.
It would possibly need Wetlands Protection Act approval, which would go back.
Yeah, that's the 70s.
Right. So I would say it's something you'd like to keep, so I would try to document, if you have photographs, some documentation that's pre-existing, the existing regulations, and then we can go from there. So that's something for you to bring back when we hear again.
You can, I would stop by the office, building department might have some pictures, or it might be on an old site plan or something, so
Okay.
Mhm.
ask for health or building and see if you can find anything on your property that shows a wall from an old site plan.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks, Nicole. Let's go around the table and see if the commissioners have any comments. Jim, do you want to start?
I have one more thing to add.
Yep.
The fence, I don't mind taking out.
Mhm.
But it really has we have no use for the fence itself. It was, as he said, it was for their dogs. So
Okay.
when we first bought it, we were kind of, we don't really need the fence, so.
Okay. Well, I think your narrative is quite brief, and so I would say, make notes on things that you can update in the narrative when you come back to us, and give us a revised narrative, and
Well,
so.
the narrative's brief because, again, the project itself it's a kit. It's very
Right.
similar to a Lego kit.
Right.
Just connect 5 pieces and put the 4 holes in.
And that's fine. I think that's okay, but I'd just say for the purposes of the continuance, there'll be a few things for you to make adjustments in the narrative and bring that back to us. And one of those things would be to remove the fence, and then some information on the status of that, the wall. You could simply report that you're gonna remove the fence would be helpful.
Sure. And what is the process, Nikki, for the variance that you mentioned at the beginning with Massachusetts?
That was when you have to file a Chapter 91 license for the dock. One of their requirements is, I think, 20 or 25 feet from a property line.
That's what Amy states in here.
Yeah, so I don't know how lenient they are about granting a variance and being only 10 feet away, you'd have to contact the state on that.
So I do a state chapter 91 application and at the same time request the variance?
Yes, and Moran could, I mean, you can do it yourself, it's not the easiest application, but Moran would definitely know how to do it for you if that was easier.
And it sounds like you have support of the neighbor to have it that distance, so having that documentation would probably be helpful for that application.
I have no problem with it, and there's other docks around these two ponds. John Joseph, I think there's a couple that look similar to this, and there's the dock I didn't even know about. There's a couple of bird streets down from where he is. They just sold the house, and it's a private dock.
Yeah.
I think it's a wooden dock. I don't know. I've never noticed it before, but I know there's several docks around.
Yeah.
Sort of a camp thing over on John Joseph, and I think they've got a similar metal type of dock system there somewhere. I don't know. I mean, I go around with my paddle boat with my son. I don't do the sunfish anymore, but at the paddle boat, we're still putting the on in the ponds.
Okay. Well, our rules have a setback to the nearest structure like this of 65 feet, and you're okay with that? It's the state chapter 91 that has that 25 feet from the property line, so that's up to you to resolve.
And it helps that the property line isn't a neighbor, it's just that open space, so they may.
Okay, he's on the other side?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the dock is closest to the cul-de-sac at the end of Whippoorwill.
Okay.
And then there's open space and then the next door neighbors across the street.
Okay.
So that bodes well, I think, since you're not really encroaching on a residential property.
All right. Do you want to start with Jim with any questions?
Sure. Were you able to get the dock out yet?
We took it out on August 3rd.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chase, would you like to see this?
Well, I do have a copy of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it looks like we got to hear back from Waterways on the location. Yeah, if you wanted to move it farther to the west, might have a problem with that. It would essentially, you'd have to remove the vegetated wetland. So they got to kind of establish that it can actually go in that area, that very limited area.
Yeah, I don't think we could move it any further west or left towards his property because of that vegetated wetland
Yeah, I
and
don't think so.
all the shrubbery that's there. So where Moran placed it is about as far.
Mhm.
I mean, it's really the only place you can put it.
Yeah, because of the positioning of the property line.
Right.
Right. Which it doesn't meet the state setback for that, so.
So I'll apply for the variance.
Yeah.
Sounds like, if I'm hearing this right, I need to apply for the variance, I need to remove the fence, and then I'll do some research on the tie wall, if that was perhaps there before
Right.
the bylaw, but does anybody have a definitive year that the bylaw went in?
I think our bylaws were 2003, maybe a little bit earlier, and I think Amy will know that, and so I think what you should do is look for some documentation and then call into Nicole or Amy and say, here's what I got, and how does this match up, and have that discussion, and then you can bring those results back to the next hearing.
And then when you're doing your Chapter 91 license, I would suggest getting some letters from your neighbors and someone from the association saying they don't have an issue with you being that close to the property line, because that would help.
Okay, I've actually already got 3 letters from neighbors, the 3 closest neighbors, that would have visual on the dock. And I think there's someone here from the association.
Jim, did you have? I'm going to call the audience in a minute, so don't worry. I'm going to call you, but first I want to go around the table. So, Jim, did you have any more comments?
I guess the only other thing with Amy had somewhat of an issue with its proposed location here, in that it's so close to that vegetated wetland. So if there is absolutely no problem having it right on the line, it maybe could move over another 5 feet or something. That would alleviate that concern, if that's possible.
Can you clarify that to which way?
To the east.
To the east?
Yes.
So the setback from the property line is 5 feet? Rather than
Yes,
10?
yeah.
Well,
That would, yeah, I think that's good for the vegetated wetland, but it might be counter to Chapter 91 interest.
Right.
So, Stan, do you have any thoughts?
yeah, I guess the open space, who owns that? Is that association property?
Yes. the full
So
grade
I would
setbacks.
think it's not just a matter, I don't know, like I'm in a neighborhood, we have a very informal association. I don't know if this is a formal association.
Yes, it is.
So I'm not sure who has the power to, I mean, we're talking neighbors, yes, but we're talking next to the property that belongs to the association. So I don't know who that,
Do you want to hear from the association now?
well, we can wait just a minute, because,
Okay.
but I mean, that's the question, I'd say, who really can grant the approval to be close to that association property?
Well, it sounds like our rules do not speak towards a setback from a property
Right.
line. Right? So really, we're looking for 65 feet from the nearest waterway structure.
Right.
And so we're satisfied with that. So it's,
Right. So-
we probably shouldn't be too concerned about that setback, other than the fact we'd like to see some distance from the bordering vegetated wetland.
Okay,
So-
and that was Amy's, that was Amy's concern, if we put the dock there, it's okay now, but as the vegetated wetland, the growth that occurs around that dock, she's concerned you'd start pruning. And I don't know how we would control that, and that's
We
what,
could condition, future maintenance around the dock. Hard to enforce, but we could
right,
condition that.
right, that's the issue. I think that's all right now.
Okay, thanks.
I have no comments.
Okay, any comments, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with these kinds of docks, but your description of how it's moored is screwing in 2-inch metal posts didn't sound like very far.
No,
So my question is, how robust is that? And, we get wicked storms and wicked wind around here, and I guess the question would be, particularly in light of the fact that you're right next to vegetated wetland, is that gonna stay in place? And do you have any assurances from the vendor who's selling you this dock that it actually will not be subject to high winds and wave action on the pond?
well, I only have, the 1 year of evidence because we had it in. If you remember the March storms,
I do.
it lived through those 3 storms without moving.
Didn't move at all.
No.
So this is on the north side of the pond, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, would be a concern of mine, but I don't know where the answer comes from, so I'm not sure.
I mean, the posts are heavy.
Uh,
They're probably 60 pounds. So you hit the ground, twist it into the sand 3 or 4 times. It's an auger.
right.
So that, and then the pieces themselves are pretty heavy as well. But they float, so.
I'd say we don't have a lot of feedback on disruption for this type of dock for the season at which they're allowed to be put out.
Right, so in the winter, all the March storms, those were northerly winds. In the summer, we get southwesterly winds. I don't know. Are there other structures of this type moored in the same way on that pond?
On the adjacent pond over on Joseph's Pond, there are. But again, I would never plan on having them in March ever again. That was my error.
Right, I get that, yeah. I don't know how to answer
I
that.
do know that the structures on Joseph Pond, there were no permits ever obtained for those, which is bothersome.
That was gonna be my question. How many of these other docks, or several on the 2 ponds, have permits?
I can't
Can't
answer.
say we've researched every single dock as we come across the
There are
knowledge
some
that.
then, huh? There's some that have permits.
Well,
Oh, I'm sure, yes.
I would say most. I mean, it's been a long time since I think people have been, haven't been aware that they need a permit for docks. I think it's been, pretty common. So there may be some, but I don't think there's many. Well, let me move on to comments from the audience. Did you folks want to have something to say?
Well, yes, actually, we're just here gathering the facts. Like I said, my name is George Myers and this is Stacy, and I'm on the board, and it is a formal organization. As far as I can tell, I looked at the drawing, this property next to Jerry's is association property. It's one of our beaches. It's not one of the beaches that's commonly used by a lot of people, but it is association property. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't agree to where the dock is now if it's a requirement of 25 feet. But I would say that I can't make that decision or anyone else. We would have to go back to the board and discuss that as far as whether we agree. I can't say, that sounds great. If you are taking out the fence, which I believe, at least according to the drawing, is on our property,
Sounds like it is,
that was a good thing. That's mainly the reason I was here.
to take the fence out.
Well,
I guess
You
we
can't-
just wanted to attend the meeting to see what the process was. And I have to say, it's unfortunate when you bought the house that you didn't know any of this. And I guess when you have your land surveyed and you buy a house, what do they really tell you? I guess you didn't know, but you're looking at this plot plan, and he's almost 32 feet over into our land. And the dock was on that land, and that's all been cleared and has sand and everything. That's, to me, that seems, it's not his doing, I understand that, but that road should come down and go like this, and, we were made aware of this, when this all came into play, that, the amount, the distance that this lot, that the prior owner had put the fence and made his beach area that much bigger. I mean, what is it, 32 feet? That's a lot.
Do you expect the association would favor keeping the timber wall that comes over into your property? Or would you rather see that out?
we'd be guessing, but
I
I
don't
don't
know.
see
That's-
that being an issue myself personally.
I mean, unfortunately, with the fence up, when he bought the house, he was under the assumption his yard was that much bigger than it really was.
Right.
And where the dock was in originally was on association property. It never was, so,
But now that we know it, we have to, there's no way we could give away association property, so. The fact that you're taking the fence down sounds like a good thing.
sorry.
Yeah, the fence has no value unless
Yeah.
it's for their dogs.
Yeah.
But if it's association property, that allows association members to use that area.
Just a question on this, how long did the Colas own that for several years? I can't remember how many, 5, 7 years?
What I
It's bought in
understood.
2010.
They bought it in 2010, oh, so wait, well, 7 years. I thought about that, yeah.
So it could have been prior to them also?
No, they put the fence in,
Oh, the Cohens did?
yes.
Oh, okay, so it
Absolutely.
wasn't the prior owner, okay.
No, it was Colas that put the fence in, because they brought their dogs.
Do you know if they opened the beach up at that time too?
They did a lot of things, I can't see all that stuff over there. I assumed that the fence was on their property because it's not even right next to the road. I mean, it's close
No,
to,
no.
it's close to the road, I guess, but
No,
it's,
it's at least, the fence is at least 20 foot on associated property,
So that's what-
association property. If this is the property line, which I think you have, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
yeah, okay.
Okay? And
I
so-
mean, I never looked at any of that stuff, I'm not even on that street.
It's not an issue. It's,
It really isn't, but I'm letting them, carry
The
it out.
bulb at the end of the lane
Short meeting, so
is
I was all that.
not
Yeah.
all road,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No,
So
it's not, the road just goes straight down, really, there's a little bit at the end.
The west of it is association property.
it's gonna be.
So one thing to keep in mind is the resolution of this issue is going to come through the Chapter 91 process, because they're the ones with a 25-foot setback to the property line. It's not so much ours. So I think as you prepare that application, I think you should be in contact with the association and try to understand, you know, the best resolution here.
Again, I'm not saying we wouldn't approve it, I'm just saying that
Right.
we have to be on board and say this is a good deal.
Right. But the application before us just involves your property and your dock. There are no setback issues. So,
If you determine that that fence was put up and that was all clear, would you require that to be returned to its natural state?
if the fence was put in recently, it should have come before us. 2000.
Talking about the beach area.
Yeah, well, that's something that should have come before us. If there was grooming of the beach, if they added sand, if they added that timber wall, all that stuff should have come before us. I don't know if we would rule on that independent of enforcement action because we're ruling on the notice of intent for the pier. So that's something we'd probably have to have an independent site visit and talk about that. If you folks come back and say the association would like to see that timber wall gone because it was not authorized, then that's something we'd have to pursue under an enforcement action.
We were just saying we're not familiar with the new wall,
Right.
so that was even a good thing.
Yep. So I think tonight we want to gather some questions for you to come back to us with a continuance. I also think that we should discuss issuing a fine for the placement of the dock initially. It's something that's quite consistent with us that we've done for saltwater and freshwater water-dependent structures that have been installed without a permit. We've issued fines, and I would like to recommend that we do fine this occasion a $300 fine under the bylaws. So I want to hear some discussion on that. My feeling is that I understand that you felt you were not aware of this, but it still is, you know, pretty well-known concept that these structures need to be permitted, and so I feel that it should be fined a single event, $300 fine for the installation of the dock and float without a permit. So can we have some discussion on that? How do the other members feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I understand that it doesn't sound like you willingly or with knowledge made that mistake. But to be consistent, you know, docks are a pretty big deal. People go to great lengths to try and get permits, sometimes taking a lot of time and money and don't end up getting a permit. So I think it is important to enforce those rules.
Thanks, Jim. And I don't see anything myself or our bylaws or the Wetlands Protection Act that would prevent this from going forward. So I feel like, you know, you have a good notice of intent here, but I do feel that the situation, to be consistent, warrants that. So before I make a motion, I'd just like to hear from everybody.
And I guess my other question then, in other cases, we would do the same thing.
We would, in this case, you know, the dock came in, Amy asked that it was removed, and then appeal was made to keep it
Right.
for a while, and then Amy put in a hard date of August,
Right.
August 10th, I think.
Fourth.
So there was some back and forth, and we did receive notice from some neighbors that were concerned about this dock, so there was concerns expressed. So I think it would really be inconsistent with our practices to not have that fine. And it is possible the fine could be put towards some on-site improvements. I don't want to say now if that's what happened, but say the timber wall was removed and there could be some plantings associated with that activity, it's possible that we could decide to put the fine towards that type of use. So, but either way, I think we should just all, understand that what we're doing, because we have a willing applicant here. It's a good proposal. I think it's going to go forward, but I do think it warrants that $300 assessment. Any thoughts from the proponent on this?
I accept that. It's fine.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to motion that we impose a $300 fine under our wetlands bylaw for a water-dependent structure installed without authorization.
I'll second it.
Second that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries unanimously. So with that, I think we're gonna seek a continuance. When would you like to come back? Next meeting, meeting after? What's your thoughts on when you'd like to come before us again?
You're every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks?
Yeah, September 5th is our next one, and then it's 16th or something like that.
Do you know if that coincides with the Waterways Night?
They only meet once a month, and I think they are September 19th.
Oh,
So it would be after.
Because they are on Wednesday nights. They are at the same time as
It
us.
happens at the same time, so
Yeah, so you would go to, I'm almost positive it's September 19th because Strandway is going that day. And so then you'd be on the first meeting in October, 18th Street.
the dock's out, so you really don't have any rush, and
Oh,
you
it's
might
not the
want
fifth?
some time to try to find documentation
No,
for that
because
timber
Waterways is
wall.
the 19th.
Maybe have a discussion with the association, even though it's not really our business. So would the first meeting in October be suitable? Or would you like to try to do something sooner?
I think I'd like to try it sooner.
So I guess the question is, when will we hear back from Waterways?
Pretty much the next day, I think we could talk to John and see what they said.
But they're not gonna meet until, are they gonna discuss it this month, or not till?
I don't know if they have a filing deadline or anything like that. I know Mark Burgess has tried to do both in one night.
Right.
Go to them and then be on the end of our agenda.
Yeah.
And have like an approved plan that they sign off on, so.
You know, we
try
can
that.
put it on that second meeting in September and see how we do. Why don't we?
I'll try to coordinate that, and then
Yeah,
if it doesn't work, you can push me to the next one.
right, let's try for that.
So I think it's the 19th.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe it is.
Okay, so I guess,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the role of the waterways?
our wetlands bylaws instruct us to receive comment from the Waterways Committee, and they're not a ruling body on a dock and pier, it's really the Conservation Commission, but our bylaws say that we must receive their recommendations on a structure. And so things like navigation.
What's their interest? What are they focusing on?
Navigation,
Oh, navigation.
safety.
I
tho-
think Heinz looks at it, shellfish and.
Right. If there was, yeah, the Department of Natural Resources would look at it as well, for shellfish and saltwater occasions, and then freshwater if there's a sea run, fish run. River herring came up, in this case, they're not coming into the pond. So really, it would be navigation and safety, public safety, and, but it's something where it's in our regs that we need to receive that recommendation, so.
All right, so I'll attempt to get on the beginning of their meeting so that I can be on the end of your meeting.
Yeah, we'll put you on the agenda and we can postpone you until you get here, as long as it's not after we adjourn.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Is that continued to the 15th?
Well, I'll move that we continue it to September 19th.
I believe so.
Okay,
All right, second.
second it, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, consideration.
Yep.
So I do have those 3 letters from neighbors. They're original, so should I scan them and send them?
Yeah, that'd be
to
great,
Nikki,
and
and then
then
you
put
can
them in the
send them
file,
around?
yep.
Yeah, I think for the file that'd be helpful. I don't think it'll be an issue for us unless we talk about some type of restoration activity with that timber wall. Say that becomes something that you want to take out, or the association wants to take out, then we can discuss at the next hearing, but that's up to you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And if all of you could sign in on that sheet of paper.
Okay, I guess we're gonna move on to,
Did you need those proof cards?
yes, please.
One of them, I think, maybe an old address because it got
Sent back.
returned to center.
That's okay, thank you. Okay, pass those down to Nicole.
I may have sent something out in the mail to my insurance company and then got
All
it
right,
back
so
in
we're on to the
mail.
order of conditions. The 18 Strandway.
Carolyn did have one correction on number 19. A monthly report on status of construction shall be submitted annually. So I don't think Amy meant to have the word annually in there. So
Mhm.
I'll cross that out.
Yep.
Nice, yeah.
So number 19,
Yep.
I can't comment on this because it was at the last meeting, correct?
Yep. I thought we had one condition on a benchmark for the reconstruction of the riprap. Does that ring a bell?
I do remember
On the wall.
talking about that.
On the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were talking, how did you say it? You want it to be,
And it could be that it's gonna be in the plans.
because I'm trying to remember the,
You know what I think we should do is for number 22, Nicole, is that, I think what I was looking for was in the as-built plans to have a benchmark, or I think we asked for really 2 to 3 benchmarks, you know, downstream end, upstream end, where an elevation was established that could be returned to see, you know, what happens over time. So if we can just ask Amy maybe to modify 22, this shall include the rock of revetment and, you know, 2 to 3 benchmarks. And Amy might have notes on what we exactly asked for, but I know there were specific benchmarks that, you know, you could look at how salt marsh responds over time. You could look at how, you know, any erosion that occurs in reference to the benchmarks.
I remember that because, I forget the fellow's name, but he was questioning what you were talking about.
Yeah, he
You
didn't
said
think-
you wanted specific ones
Right.
that you can be measured over time.
He felt the plans showed the elevations as they stand, and I wanted something that was, you know, an actual point
Right.
that you can come back to. And number one, was it built correctly? You know, was it put exactly where it's supposed to be? Number two, how does things respond over time? So that's the purpose of the benchmark. And he was saying, well, if we build it in the plan, why do you need a benchmark? But what we see over time, sometimes people install these things a little bit different, and then they come back and, you know, there's impacts to salt marsh or things change. So I like the idea for revetments of having the benchmark.
Would you want to officially vote on them at the next meeting, or would you be willing to vote pending that, and then Amy sends you guys
Yeah,
the wording,
I-
so that you can still issue it?
Yeah, I haven't found any other comments so far, so I think we can vote on it tonight. And Amy might recall or look at the minutes
Yeah, I can look at
and
them.
and determine whether it was 2 or 3. I forget just how many it was, but I know I wanted to have at least a downstream and upstream point that was, you know, fixed to a specific location and elevation. It comes into play sometimes for these revetments that are installed, and they put them a little further out than they're supposed to.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's trying to get a little more lawn or a little more space.
They had said that the new revetment was gonna be installed landward of the existing.
Right, which is good.
And
Yep.
the salt marsh would be on that area.
Gee, at the wastewater thing today, they keep talking about outdoor showers are illegal. The rinsing station.
they're rinse stations, you're not supposed to be using soap and it's
But
supposed to be tied into your
we're referring
septic.
to an outdoor shower here in this
Oh,
condition
well,
on number
that's not our
7.
regulation,
Wow.
Really?
Is that in the resource area or any place?
No.
Any place, it's supposed to be tied into your septic, so it's
Ah.
supposed to be a real
Theoretically,
official-
I heard that when I moved here about 5 years ago. That
Really?
It was in the paper or something about technically they're illegal, but everybody has one.
Good luck enforcing that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 13, are we comfortable with that? We usually have something that says in perpetuity and references the buffer zone. I guess the entire lot is in the buffer zone, is that right?
It virtually is, and they agreed upon that as the plan for the entire lot.
Okay.
But yeah, Amy does usually put in that, that sentence of this condition will be in place in perpetuity and not released by a later condition.
Yeah.
That is in item
Irrigation.
15 for the irrigation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can add that in easy enough.
Okay.
Right.
With a qualifier that for the land management plan, it's okay. We didn't put a time of year for the revetment construction. But I don't think we should go back and do something, and then by practicality, they probably won't be there in the spring, early summer anyways. All right, you folks comfortable with approving it tonight and then having these modifications made?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Anytime somebody wants to make a motion,
Can I do that?
sure. Well,
Because I wasn't here
I
last
think for an
meeting,
order you
so-
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, for an order.
So you can sign off on the order, on the
I
paperwork
can.
and everything,
Right.
For a
yeah.
cert of compliance and the order conditions, you don't have to be at the hearing.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the order of conditions for Robert M. and Darlene Turner at 18 Strandway, to include, want me to list?
Uh,
The-
I think Nicole's got them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just say with them.
Yep.
With the modifications that were mentioned.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor? Aye. None opposed.
I don't trust them.
Well, fair enough. All right. Nicole's got a whole slew of certificates of compliance.
We have one more order, Holly
Oh, we do?
Tarleton.
Which one?
Holly Tarleton at Ford
yeah.
Street.
Oh, yeah,
Street.
I missed that one. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, the garage.
Yep, that's right. No comments on those, the order?
I don't have.
Anyone ready to make a motion?
I'll make it, I'll make the motion, we approve the order of conditions for Holly Carlton at 130 Forest Road.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Now, for the certs of compliance, we have 9, and we have comments from Amy. And so, what I propose that we do is if anyone has specific comments on any of these, some of these are, you know, really simple. In some cases, work wasn't done. Does it
Pretty
ma-
much all of them are 10-year-old
Right.
things that haven't been closed out. People
Right.
don't realize they need to close them out.
Right, so I would say, if you guys agree, that if people have questions on specific ones, let's ask Nicole those questions, and then in the end, we approve them all at once. Is that
Yep, that
okay
sounds
with
good.
everybody?
Yeah.
All right, so, going down the list. Oh, wait a minute, let's see. Sorry, trying to find Amy's comments. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I think I'd like to ask about 0 South Chatham Road,
Okay?
and any others before then that people have? The first 4, any comments there?
No.
Okay. So for 0 South Chatham Road, that was a case where there was no development. It was all resource area, but there was some invasive plants, and the proponent wanted to clean things up. And so I guess my question is, you know, how does it look? Was there any establishment of cleaned areas or pathways?
No,
Or
it
was-
doesn't look like anything was ever done to it. Completely
Okay.
regrew, naturalized.
Oh, good.
Amy said he did actually do planting,
Yep.
but I mean, you can't tell where or anything. It's
Okay.
So 0 South Chatham Road is the one on the northeast corner of Uncle Leamy's and South Chatham Road. There's a house there.
Yeah, it's right.
And then there was clearing across South Chatham Road toward the herring run.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's, I
Right.
thought, there wasn't a case of illegal cutting there? I thought that
They-
there was an issue with that.
They came before us, and, you know, he wanted to, he explained he wanted to, like, have access to the bog, because what was a former bog, which they owned part of it, and so it was, but it was in the name of invasive plant control. So when we heard this one, it was a little bit concerning, because, you know, was he gonna develop something? Was he gonna clear some of it? Was it really for invasive plants? And because there was no buildings there, there was no, you know, plans to do anything with it, just taking off invasive plants. So we were concerned about maybe some clearing that would result in some type of development that wasn't described, but it sounds like it simply was invasive plant removal, and
Yeah, I think he was kind of trying to investigate being able to develop that property, but it's unbuildable. It's all bog.
right, that was our feeling. Many years ago, there was a shack there, and you have to try really hard to find any remnants of that. There's probably a few shingles around, but
Fusion.
somebody probably had a bog structure.
You mean, so now you're talking about the southeast corner of South Chatham Road.
Yeah, it's a-
land directly across, so Uncle Beanie's, it's, if you're going down Uncle Beanie's, it's on the left, and then 58 Uncle Beanie's that's being worked on is
Right
right
across
there,
the street.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
58 is the first one on the right being constructed, because the next one is
Yes.
also.
Right.
Yeah, there's a 20-something Uncle Beanie's as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Years ago, somebody built a berm out in the tidal marsh to restrict tidal flow, and they put in cranberry bogs.
Really?
And you'd
There.
never know it, because the bogs are long gone, the ditches are still there, but it's all somewhat salt marsh, but a lot of phragmites now.
Yeah, there is, and you were mentioning that it's actually grown into the bog, and I was looking at that, yeah, really.
It's come in
Really
tremendously.
has.
Yeah, it's really increased over time, so that's an area I'd love to see some proactive work, maybe through Department of Natural Resources, to try to get some of that frag out. But, okay, I just wanted to ask. I'm glad it went that way. Other than that, for the dredging at 3 Fiddler's Landing, was there an as-built or a dredge post?
It was not listed in the conditions to do one.
All right, what does that go back to?
I think that one's around like 2008, I believe.
Yep. Okay. Recently, we've been asking for, post dredging.
Yeah, and there have been a lot in that time frame that have asked for it, but this one, for some reason,
Yep.
it didn't.
Yep, so that one's tough, because you just don't know
Yeah, I mean,
what they
I
did.
can't even do a site visit, really. It's more,
Right.
what's the point?
And the same goes, I think, for the beach nourishment at 3
Yeah,
Haltz
yeah,
Point.
you can't.
Um,
And I looked at the, Google Earth of the property from back then and forward, and it changes so much every year, so it's
Right.
it's impossible to tell if it was done in approval.
We've been recently asking for better beach nourishment monitoring and documentation. So I think Amy's done a good job getting good monitoring plans together for that. So if these come up with more recent projects, we can have some information as to what was done. Okay, any comments from anyone else on other projects? Well, if somebody wants to make a motion for all 9, I think we can group them. I think that's okay.
I approve the certificates of, make a motion that we approve the certificates of compliance for all 9 of the items indicated here as we've discussed.
Second?
Second by Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. That's a lot of certs right there.
It's my little project.
Yeah. So we'll sign those tonight?
I'm up to, I only started with what we have upstairs, which is maybe some 2005, but mostly 2006 on. And I'm in the 2010, 2011 timeframe issued orders, so. We're getting a really good response. I send a letter, and a lot of people are,
Yeah.
doing the paperwork pretty quick. It
But
just helps, all the time we're getting questions. Has this been closed out during a property transfer? So I'm just trying to.
But
be proactive.
are we all signing these tonight, or at some other point? Oh, okay, that's what,
Do you want to start sending them around?
Might as well. I mean, the minutes are next, and so we can look at are we reviewing the minutes for the executive session of April
We
18th?
can do that when we go into executive session.
Okay.
And I got May 2nd done today, so I don't know if you guys want to take the time to read them now or put them on the next meeting.
Let's see, so
And I have extra copies.
we've got the executive session coming up for two sites with the minutes. I haven't looked at the May 2nd one you have, or the May,
Yeah, May 2nd. I have a copy right here if you need it.
oh, I got May 7th.
It says May 7th, I noticed that, but it's May 2nd. I've changed it on the
Okay.
computer already.
Was there a second one you want us to look at, or just that one?
Just this one and then the executive session.
Okay, well, let's do May 2nd. under the discussion on May 2nd, we did set a site visit that happened after that.
For Forest Street.
Well, wait a minute, that come later? The discussion on 177 Forest Street, am I confusing this for a later hearing?
I think so, yeah.
Because yes,
Hearing at the end of June.
right, we discussed almost the same things, and then we had a site visit, so, okay, well then scratch that. I was gonna insert the site visit discussion, but that happened later.
Did I find the minutes? Or did-
This is them here. If you want to.
From May? I don't think.
If I could add one comment on that discussion paragraph. So it says, Chase does not view the invasive species management as mitigation for the wall. It is in favor of the draft plan Isowski created. He would like to see the top of the bank to be planted adjacent to where the infraction occurred. So you could just add that to the end, adjacent to where the infraction occurred, to protect against future encroachment to the resource area. That was a big point I was trying to make, and then we came back the next time with a plan that was kind of moved away from that. But I did stress that at that hearing.
Yeah, we actually did a site visit the other day, and he's, trying to throw in more stuff here and there, so we're just like,
Well,
we
but
just get something done before you start
But
changing
Amy
the
was
project.
gonna lay that out with him, right?
Yeah, she was.
Right, and we had some pretty good agreement at the site visit that he was gonna work in that area right next to where the wall.
Right, but she was gonna do some measurements and stake,
We went out there to do that, and there's some invasives that she's allowing him to remove, and then we'll stake more of that area for him.
because
So
we
we'll
were,
do that.
the whole intent, she was supposed to come up with, what was it, the 500?
It was 1,000.
So there was we were
500,
asking for
500.
1,000, right?
Right.
And that was supposed to be like 500 and 500, wasn't it?
Yeah, the
500, right.
compromise was he
He would do 500 up
Right.
on top, and she was gonna lay out the 500
Right.
to see what it was gonna look like,
Yeah.
so that we could look at that and see if we were in agreement on that or not.
Yeah, so that's probably the next step, and he sounds like he's making new
Doing
suggestions.
other stuff now?
Like, we were at the site visit to do the measuring, and he kept coming up with all these other things, and we were like, obviously, you're not ready for us to be out here and talk about mitigation yet, so. We let him do some of the invasive removal to clear up the area so we could better stake it and such, so he's gonna call us in a few weeks.
Yep. I have no further comments on those minutes.
Sorry about that.
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for May 2nd.
Okay,
I'll second it.
Stan seconds it. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so we have to adjourn to not come back and to go into executive session.
No, maybe that was the problem. I never had the May minutes, but I got an April,
You picked up your packet too early, so you may not have
18th.
gotten them.
This is an April 18th minutes I've got in my packet.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's both. We're doing those in executive session.
Okay.
Do you want to take care of other business before we go in?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay. I had one item, and I talked to Amy about it, and she felt it was okay to discuss it, but I'm not gonna go into great detail, because I'd rather have, really everybody here. But, we've had a proposal to put an oyster reef in Herring River bouncing around. And it really began with, a fine that came out of the work done down at the fish house. And so the concept was to install oyster reefs in the river that would grow oysters, but would basically be a seed stock. They wouldn't really be harvested, they'd just provide a seed stock for the river, the main channel of the river used to have really nice beds of oysters, but they've died off. They've I don't know if it's water quality or disease. It's not really clear what happened, but if you scuba dive in there, you can see tremendous beds of dead oysters in certain places. So I drafted a proposal. It's been reviewed by the harbor master, Amy, Heinz Proft, and the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I was trying to get the Nature Conservancy to work with us on the permitting, and that might not happen. They have some experience with these types of oyster reefs, so I think what I'd like to do is propose that maybe the commission gets involved with working on the design and permitting ourselves. And so here's the proposal that's been reviewed by those different folks. So it's pre-application, and I'm really just bringing it up because we spend so much time working on things that we have to, moving these different projects, and sometimes it's really nice to work on fun projects, interesting projects, and I think this one qualifies. And so I just want to have you guys look at the draft, think about it. I would like to maybe see if we can in-house advance this towards permitting. What it probably means is that whoever works on it closely, including myself, probably can't vote on it. And so what I'd like to see maybe is somebody step up and say, hey, I'd like to help work on this permitting. And then you'd work with Nicole or Amy or myself, and we'd tackle it. But I think we'll wait till we have Amy back and she can answer that question, because I think if we work on the proposal in detail, then we probably can't vote on it later on.
How can you prevent anybody from going in there and taking the oysters?
That's a big issue for the Division of Marine Fisheries, because they want to know, they're really concerned about harvest during the closed season.
Yeah.
And so the plan really has to dictate that. You'll see some of the sites we propose to put these reefs out are in the deep channel, and so you're not going to get there unless you illegally dive on them or tong them with big rakes. So really it's not likely to happen, but there is...
They will be in bags?
They'll be in bags.
Yeah.
There are proposals to put them under the Lowell County Bridge, and that would be a place that might be difficult if somebody wants to go down there and poach in the off-season, and so that might have to be removed. It'll need a permit. It'll need Chapter 91 will have to say yes or no, which is quite a permitting load.
Yeah.
Division of Marine Fisheries will have to say yes or no. The Conservation Commission will have to look at it. The harbor master. So those proposed locations under the bridge might get kicked out for that reason.
Yep.
My thought is...
I would be very interested in working on this.
Okay. Yeah, we do so much work where we're just going meeting to meeting. It's nice to work on things like this. So take a look at it, and I think we'll come back to it at some point and talk about it in terms of, who's going to work on it and what needs to be done. But I think if one person tackled the permitting, it'd be a lot. And there is some funding, but I think it's something that has quite a lot of support.
So I have a question, which is, how do you know that whatever habitat degradation caused the loss of oysters in the first place isn't just gonna blow the thing up when you try to seed oysters there?
It's a really good question, and I've put in some monitoring here that might give us some feedback on that. But for example, right now, Harwich and every other town puts out oysters anyways. Just puts them out there for harvest, puts them in places it's easy to harvest. So,
and how do they do?
They're grown to a size where they're like one season away from being legal, and they seem to do fairly well. So, in that case, it's like a put and take type of fishery, and it seems to work pretty well. The public loves it. In this case, it's a little different, where we're trying to mitigate for a past infraction by developing a seed stock that might enhance natural recolonization.
So, is there water quality monitoring or monitoring of the area that would be a bed, so you know what's there? Do you know oxygen levels or dissolved oxygen levels are? I have no idea what the right range is for oysters, or whether that's an issue.
Yep.
But is that part of the project, is to measure and monitor those things?
Not water quality. The state monitors bacterial levels. That happens right now, and that drives the opening and closing of the area. Right now, it's only open from, I believe, late November to the end of April for harvest, because when summer picks up and people come around, your bacterial levels increase. So it's shut down for harvest then. The state will continue to monitor bacterial levels. There is some monitoring of nutrients, nitrogen, by the SMAST under that process. You'll see some discussion in this on how oysters can improve water quality, but I don't want to oversell that point, because I'm a little skeptical as to what it can actually produce. But I think it's one of those side benefits. We might have the oysters actually contribute to water quality improvements. They'll certainly contribute to natural processes by producing organisms that other things feed on. And maybe they'll improve to a stock that can lead to better harvest down the road. So I think for a small investment, it can certainly provide benefits. Will it restore those mid-channel oyster beds that were there, and you can still see them underwater? I don't know. These things died off quite a while ago. I've learned that 30, 40 years ago, commercial fishermen used to tong them, and they were there. They died off. And was it water quality as the Cape became more developed, or was it diseases? There's been some southern diseases for oysters that have moved northward. You can't really separate that. We're not going to be able to afford to monitor for the diseases. That's not going to happen as this project. But I think we can still monitor the survival in the bags, and that is proposed here. So take a look at it, and we'll come back to it at a later meeting. We've discussed it once before, and I think what we'll do is put it on the agenda for discussion down the road, and then I think Amy can set the tone for what kind of feedback can be given. And I think, myself, I probably can't vote on it, but the one good thing is with the harbor master, the natural resources director, Amy, they all said they like it. It's a good concept. So not a lot of downsides to it.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot of cost as laid
No.
out.
No, it's not a lot of cost.
But there is a lot of benefit, because maybe you can see why those, that 30 or 40 years ago, all of those oysters died. Does the water temperature have anything to do with it?
Temperature can allow some of the diseases of these oysters grow.
Because the water temperature has increased, hasn't it, over the last?
Yeah, we don't have records for the Herring River, but where we have records that are 20, 30 years old, the graph is just going up.
Yes, because we.
Where the records for water temperature monitoring go back 20, 30 years.
Yeah, but what locations?
Oh, the agency I work for, the Division of Marine Fisheries, has monitors at Buzzards Bay, Cape Cod Bay.
Not local here, though.
Yeah, I don't know if we have.
You know what?
any
We've owned property here since 1982. And I can tell you, from going in all the time, I think the temperature has risen.
Yeah.
I really do. You maybe think I'm crazy, but
Any place in New England where there's long-term data, the graphs are very clear.
Is that a couple degrees or?
Not a couple degrees. Buzzards Bay has warmed up maybe 1.5 degrees. And what you can do, and you can look at the data in terms of days at which the temperatures exceed 20 degrees Celsius, and so you can kind of standardize it over time, and it's just a big shift. There's a lot more of those warmer days than there used to be. The mean temperature has gone up, and the graphs demonstrate this clearly, but the number of those warmer days over 20 degrees Celsius has really increased. And it's that way worldwide. It's not just our waters here. So I think that might be allowing diseases of oysters to do better than they used to. But I think there was a sharp building of development that occurred, and my guess is that the water quality of the Herring River really degraded maybe 20, 30 years ago and killed off that old stock. And
Well, that's when a lot of construction was the mid-'80s.
yeah, there was probably some period where that happened. I don't want to discount diseases because we don't know that.
yeah.
But I do think we can turn the corner, particularly if we go to sewage systems. And then maybe you might see oysters flourish. What I'm seeing in Boston Harbor region, oysters are coming back all over the place. You can't harvest them because they're polluted for other reasons, bacterial sources, but there's been so much sewage cleanup in Boston Harbor, oysters are just growing all over the place.
Doing pretty well in Chatham. as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's one of those resources that, you know, it'd be nice to have the commission involved in a fun project that has a shot at doing something. You'll hear other towns are really diving into this, and they're selling the point that it's going to reduce the amount of homes that have to be sewered. I'm pretty skeptical to that, but at the same time, it's still a worthwhile goal because the other benefits are absolutely there, so. Okay, well, we'll come back to it, and when we do, if you guys have comments on this proposal, we'd love to hear it. Any other new business?
Nothing for me.
Okay, well, let's, then I motion that we leave the open session. We adjourn for the evening.
Second.
Second that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then I move that we move into executive session with a roll call by each member. And I, Brad Chase.
I, Paul McGuire.
I stand past through there.
I, James Donovan.
Okay, and I think, Nicole, I think that's all we have to do, or do we have to have a motion that's approved to go into executive session?
No, I think that's it,
Yeah, I
as
think-
long as it said
Yep.
you're not coming back, so.
Okay, all right. So we are in executive session.